Welcome to the Metaphysics Hour. I am your host, Rory Colgan. Today, whenever, we're going to be talking about this film, Jason Bourne, the newest installment here in 2016. And so I may do a spoiler, may not, so I would recommend waiting until you have seen this movie before you watch this video, or unless you do not intend to see this movie, then go ahead and enjoy it, because it's going to have some truth within it from the metaphysical perspective, regardless if you are actually interested in this movie or not. So when I look at reviewing a movie in metaphysics, I ask myself, okay, what is true and what is false? That's fundamental. Then I ask myself, what messages could be subliminally communicated? And again, reverting back to the first question, what's true and what's false? So there's the standard narrative of the story, and then there's the subliminal narrative of the story. Both affect the psyche, both move into the mind. And so as you can see here, it's an action movie. It's Jason Bourne. So it's a former Black Ops of the CIA operative, and this is just the latest installment of it, as said before. So there's a few things that are wrong about the film, and in terms of piquing your interest and keeping you interested, I think it did an okay job of doing such things. But where you run into problems with this film is in the area of patriotism, okay? So this is a central theme throughout this movie, is that patriotism is somehow powerful. And let me be clear here, in metaphysics, patriotism is weak. Absolutely 100% weak. Now, it's stronger than fear, it's stronger than anxiety, it's certainly stronger than apathy. And for those of you that are schooled in psychology, you may be familiar with the late work of Dr. David Hawkins. Dr. David Hawkins talked about a map of consciousness and took different human constructs, and in those human constructs was able to basically look at what is powerful and what is weak. Now, patriotism would be in pride, and pride and patriotism are weak, and so therefore cannot be powerful enough to overcome the problems of society. So if you're looking at this movie for explaining the current situation that we exist within, you will see part of the reason we're in the shitstorm that we're in is that patriotism, people are willing to fight and die for a flag, or people are willing to fight and die because somebody else says so. That is ludicrous and insane for an intelligent, advanced civilization, and that's what the Metaphysics Hour is attempting to do. Help us wake up the intelligence that is innate within us. So, the other thing that I wanted to mention, and again, it goes back to the subliminal message, not something that's actually in the storyline, but something that's at the very beginning. There is a protest in, think Athens, Greece, and that's where Jason Bourne is, and there's clashes between the police and protesters. And this assumes that, well, there's a couple things in here that I want to talk about, but first, let's talk about the subliminal message. This assumes that the way to make change is to create a march and to protest, and then to eventually have a few people get some cocktail bombs and throw rocks and sticks at the police, and back and forth the two powers go. This is another form of weakness. If you want to make a real change, stop giving your power to the quote-unquote powers that shouldn't be or that should be, and start recognizing that you are a free individual. Throw off the shackles, the imprisonment chains, and recognize that you can make your own choices. And if there is something that you disagree with, then you can simply not follow it. You know, stop protesting in the streets. You have no power there. If you have a problem with your government, maybe stop paying taxes. If you do it alone, well, then maybe that would be a problem. But if you do it with 10 million people, then the government is crippled and can't take all of you on. Now, I'm not recommending that you do that, but I'm just giving an example of what a person could do instead of doing this silly thing called a protest. Because a protest means that you're giving your power away to somebody else and saying, change this so that I can feel better. Well, why don't you just take the power of your own consciousness, your own mind, and make your own life better? And I think that's where we're going to head. That's where we're going to go. Or we're going to believe that somebody else who's just a human in the position of power is going to decide for us. And that is a wrong thing to do. So the subliminal message of this movie has a lot of nuances, but basically it's a movie where there is no empowerment. And there's a lot more that we could say about it, a lot of different nuances and different scenes, but that's something that I wanted to bring to your attention. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is just how disappointed I am that this video or this movie actually used Edward Snowden's name and then took a fictitious program and put the two together. And so this is really doing a disservice to people, especially people that don't follow news stories, is it's making it too real. And so it's blending fact and fiction. And I get the same problem if there's a major news anchor that shows up on one of these Hollywood movies and supposedly reports on the news. This is a very wrong thing to be doing. If we're going to be doing something for entertainment values, then we need to have a clear distinction between the talking heads that give us real news and the talking heads that give us fake news. This blending of the two is going to only make it harder for discrimination. Maybe that's the intent, but for you and I, we have to recognize this for what it is, and it's a wrong way of thinking. It's mixing in too many elements and making it too hard to discern. So let's simplify it and let's make the story fake, or let's make the story real. And that's something that is just a personal preference, but I really think you should think about it as well. And also maybe even use this as an opportunity to think about that, well, perhaps they're talking about a real program, they just gave it a different name, because the main program that's in this film is about constant surveillance of all Americans, or all people basically, in every move. And I know that that's where the surveillance state wants to go, with the idea of protecting us from terrorism. But again, that's weakness, because you can't protect yourself from terrorism. You have to transcend terrorism. You have to stop instigating terror. You have to stop being a terrorist from somebody else's perspective. And, I'm a Second Amendment supporter, but I'm also very clear in that fighting and killing typically just creates more terrorism, as opposed to dialogue, understanding, love, and compassion, and an intelligence. As the Dalai Lama said, the greatest type of meditation that Americans can do is critical thinking. This is Rory Colgan from the Metaphysics Hour, giving you a metaphysical perspective on Jason Bourne. Have a good night, or day, or